Oh, hello there. Okay, so it's time for another little book review. Today, it's this, Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, today I haven't made any notes at all. I'm just going to try and talk about it off the cuff. I only finished reading it last night, so a lot of it's fairly fresh in my mind about what I want to talk about. There may be some spoilers, I think, but I'm not going to spoil the story itself. It'll still be worth reading if you're interested in what I've been talking about. And it's certainly worth reading. I'll say that right away. So I've previously read a few works by Kazuo Ishiguro. Never Let Me Go is a very famous one. Remains of the Day. Those are two absolutely excellent books. And this, for me, is on a par with those two. I don't think it's quite as good as either of those previous two that I've mentioned, but it's certainly up there. I've read a couple of, Tales from the Artists from the Floating World or something like that, and The Sleeping Giant, that's another one I've read. That's more of a fable. But anyway, before I get down to talking about the book, what it's about and what I think about it, I'm going to do a new thing with these book reviews. If I've got a physical copy, I'm going to smell the damn thing. I absolutely love smelling books. I don't know about you. I think if you're a reader and you like physical, traditional paper books, you probably do have a sneaky sniff now and then, don't you? Well, I know I do. This one is a very new copy, so it's this year's print, so it's going to be pretty new, although I have fingered it a little by reading it. So anyway, let's open it, take a little sniff. Okay, let's go right into the centre. Excuse me. Oh, okay, so we've got that fresh ink smell, relatively fresh. The parchment upon which it's printed is a good quality, but it reminds me of the paper that's used to wrap fish and chips, which is a very pleasant smell. But anyway, it's a new book, so it doesn't have the depth of smell that some of the older ones do. Anyway, there we are. Bit of a smelling test. So first of all, let's talk briefly, or try to be brief, about what this book's about. So Klara, we follow the whole story through the eyes of Klara, who is an AF, or artificial friend. So she's an android, I suppose you could say. And she's... we begin the story in the shop where she's up for sale, along with a number of other artificial friends. And so the whole story is told through her perspective, which is a really amazing device for what unfolds. A lot of the reviews about this are about the fact that this is about an exploration of love, or the human notion of love. And it certainly is a very large part of this. And so we follow Klara right from the shop to being purchased, and then living with a new family and exploring the lives of the people that she's living with and having to serve. I won't say what happens at the end, but you're more or less... this is the lifespan of this android that we're following. Now, the chief, it seems that the chief purpose of these artificial friends, as Klara understands it herself, is to prevent humans from experiencing loneliness. But in this situation, Klara's purchased to... I suppose, perform that function for this little girl. She's called Josie. And this little girl isn't very well at all. She's got some kind of... it's not a disease as such. In fact, they're very vague about what's wrong with her, but it appears to be related in some way to... this is set in a kind of a near future, I suppose you could say. And certain privileged children are... the term is called lifted up. They're being lifted up. So some genetic manipulation to allow them to be more intelligent, for example. I think that's what's going on. But it's a very delicate process, and a lot of children die in the process of doing it. So anyway, this Josie's going through this. I think that's what's going on, and Klara's there is kind of a nursemaid in some ways, I suppose you could say. She's keeping an eye on her to make sure she's okay and that she's healthy, but also aiding her in her education, perhaps a little. But anyway, there's another function that she's being asked to perform by the mother. But I'm not going to get into that at this point. I'll talk about it later, but that's quite a big spoiler, so I won't talk about that now. So anyway, Klara is a brilliant character. So she's intelligent to a point, but her main attribute is her ability to observe. She's got incredible powers of observation that seems to transcend the other AFs that inhabit the shop at the beginning. A lot of them are just looking forward to the day when they're going to be purchased and the day when their usefulness will be expressed fully. Klara is also looking forward to that, but she's far more interested in the world beyond the doors of the shop. So she's observing people very closely that are walking past the shop, and she notices certain people and the way people act towards one another. It's very insightful, actually, that she's picking up on ways that people behave that we are all familiar with, but we may not actually criticize and consider at the time. Social conventions and various other things, the way people interact with one another, and also the way they interact with other AFs. So there is definitely a pervasive feeling throughout this book that the AFs they're more than just objects, obviously. They're intelligent, you can have conversations with them. They are self-aware to a certain extent. But they are also kind of feared. They touch upon the idea that these, if not these AFs, then artificial intelligence itself is replacing people's jobs. So, I mean, that's something that's already happening in our lifetimes, and you can see where things are going to go for us or the future generations if we don't all die in an apocalypse, of course. But so there's this weird feeling that they're kind of dismissed, or they're ridiculed even, or manhandled sometimes, but they are also respected for their insight. So that's an interesting thing in itself. So we follow the life, or the early life of this little girl that she's looking after. I can't remember how she's like a young teenager, I think around 14, and everything that happens thereafter during the course of perhaps a year, and it focuses on the girl's illness and Klara's attempts to prevent Josie dying, basically. So that's kind of I suppose a kind of a synopsis, or whatever you would want to call that. But I'll talk about a little bit now, if I can remember all the points I was thinking about last night. There could be some spoilers here, so if I were you, if you don't want any spoilers, I'm not going to give away everything, but if you don't want any at all, I would recommend that you stop watching and go and buy the book, and then perhaps come back and see what else there is to talk about. But it's definitely worth a read. So this year, I haven't read any 5 out of 5 books. This one was close to being 5 out of 5 for me, but not quite. And I may touch upon why that is later on, maybe. So anyway, right. Whew. Okay, apologies. I just had to go and get some water because my throat was getting dry. Okay, so in terms of exploring notions of love, specifically in terms of the humans that feature in this story, it's quite interesting. There's various levels of love, I suppose you could say, being explored here. There's the love of the mother for the daughter, which is a very complex thing concerning this idea of being lifted up. So we learn later on that Josie used to have an older sister. I think she was called Sol, and she went through this process of being lifted up, this genetic enhancement, and she died. And so the mother has really suffered during this process. Obviously feels guilty for having inflicted this upon the daughter, although it was that's a notion that's explored, the morality of doing this. Interestingly, there's a boy that lives in a house nearby who's from a different kind of background, a poorer background, and will never get the opportunity to be lifted up. And so that's explored, that dynamic of social class. One other thing before I start talking again, I'm rambling. This setting is interesting because it's largely set in the countryside, which reminded me a lot of Never Let Me Go. And obviously Remains of the Day, if you've read that. Countryside, just rolling fields as far as the eye can see. We're in the future here, but there's very little to show that it is in a kind of in a far future sort of setting. I think the setting is near to where we are now, perhaps 10 years in the future. But there's nothing to say what's going on based on the environment. They do go to a city, a nameless city, and you see slightly more evidence of technology perhaps, but not a great deal. It never says where this is taking place either. I'm assuming it's in America because the boy who lives next door has a British accent, and that's remarked upon. So I think they are American, if not perhaps no, it'd be in America, wouldn't it? But it also reminded me of perhaps a Japanese environment. The Klara herself has mannerisms perhaps that could be associated with someone from Japan. Perhaps that's what I was imagining. But anyway, going back to this, the relationships. Josie has a relationship with the boy next door. What's he called? I only finished it last night. Rick. I think he's called Rick. And so they have like this kind of secret pact that perhaps they want to run away together at some point. Josie doesn't really want any part of the life that's being planned for her by her mother, it would seem. But at the same time, she's at odds with the boy next door. I think the pervasive idea of their status imposed upon by the mother is affecting her relationship with the boy. Occasionally it arises. She feels frustrated as well that they're in a different place, socially perhaps. There's also the Klara's love for Josie. I mean, there's no other way of describing it, that she's definitely expressing emotion. And it's interesting, I don't know whether they're programmed to feel that way. I think there is, that's suggested to a certain extent, because all of the AFs look forward to serving and pleasing their new owners. But Klara's extends far beyond that, I think. She goes out of her way to always try to ensure that she's doing the best for Josie, and also the mother. And by extension, also Rick and various other people she encounters. She's just a really nice person. You get to really love her perspective on life and love her as a person. Now, the complicated thing, this is a fairly big spoiler, the complicated thing which makes the mother's love for her daughter very, very strange or very complicated is the fact that she's all too aware that Josie's very ill and that she's the cause of it in a big way. And she's preparing for Josie to die. She's in a very odd way. She talks to Klara and asks if she's able to replicate her daughter mentally. And so right at the very beginning, she asks if Klara can walk like her daughter. Her daughter has a bit of a limp because of her illness, and so Klara does that perfectly. But they later visit someone in the city, an artist, who's supposedly doing a portrait of Josie. And in fact, he's actually making a facsimile of Josie's body that Klara could then inhabit. And then, after Josie's possible death, become Josie. It's very odd. A very strange idea. Very, very disturbing, actually. I won't say whether this actually comes to pass or not, but another interesting aspect of the whole thing is later on there's this assertion made that people they're suspicious of artificial intelligences, not just because they're taking jobs, but because the people that created these artificial intelligences don't know how they work anymore. They've become so complicated, their brains so complex, that they have no idea how they're arriving at these decisions that they make. Quite often they're able to predict things that humans obviously aren't able to, but they've got no idea how they're doing it. And this is touched upon by Klara, because the way she thinks she can save Josie is by asking the sun to give Josie her health back. Now, obviously, it's called Klara and the Sun. The sun plays a central role in this. As intelligent as Klara is, she has no idea what the sun is, other than the fact that it gives her power. I think these AFs are solar powered, largely. So she sees this thing every day in the shop going through the sky and then disappearing behind some buildings. And she associates it as a benevolent force, because obviously it's giving her power or giving her energy. It makes her feel better to see it and to feel its light. She always talks about the patterns that the sun casts on everything, which is really nice, really beautiful. And so she thinks that if she can make a pact with the sun, that it'll help Josie. I mean, it's totally bonkers, really. But actually, this is a big spoiler, it actually works in a very strange way. And so we're not sure. I wasn't sure whether... I thought it was just going to have a bad ending and that Josie ends up dying. Big spoiler, she doesn't. But no, the sun miraculously, or appears to miraculously, cure her. Now, so up to that point, I just thought, well, it's just a superstition that robots have based on their association with the sun and the fact that it gives them power. But perhaps there's more than that, but I can't honestly work out how that might be. But as intelligent as these robots are, Klara has no concept of the sun as being this ball of hydrogen and helium over there in the process of fusion. No, for her, it's a personality that rises from a resting place somewhere and then falls somewhere else. So she thinks it goes to sleep in a barn that's in the grounds or in the farmer's field nearby. So that's where she goes to make this pact. Now, that interaction she has with the sun, there's two points where she goes to the barn to make this deal with the sun. It was really, really brilliantly done, and it had a kind of religious overtone to it, I thought, because of the failing light, because the sun's setting, her way of perceiving the world gets kind of scrambled, and she's seeing fragments of places that she's known superimposed upon the barn itself. So it was a kind of hallucinogenic experience that, for me, had associations with religion, perhaps, and this kind of otherworldly power she's trying to bring about for help. So that was interesting. What was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah. So I've forgotten what I was going to say, but it reminded me of something else. So the pact that she makes with the sun is that if Klara can stop pollution in the city where she was purchased, there's this machine that she observes in the shop at the beginning, and it's referred to as the cootings machine. So cootings is quite. I had to Google it because I thought, is there a cootings machine that I don't know about? But this is probably some fictitious manufacturer that creates these machines that are used in roadworks. So she makes this. She sees all the pollution it creates and worries about the sun not liking the pollution, and she's not able to get as much power as normal. So she makes a pact with the sun, saying that if she can go and destroy this machine, will she help Josie get back to? Will the sun help Josie get back to full fitness? So anyway, by a very convoluted, well, quite an odd way, she ends up destroying one of these machines. Little does she know that this is just one of countless other machines, and so she thinks she's failed in this mission. Interestingly, she gets at two different times during this story, she gets both Rick and Josie's estranged father to help her in this. Neither of them fully understand the absurdity surrounding what she's trying to do, but they go along with helping her anyway. And that's because they're hoping against hope that Klara knows something that they don't, and that Klara can somehow make Josie better. It's more or less suggested that Josie's got very little chance of surviving this illness. So that was interesting as well. The father's interactions with Klara at first are very, very. He barely looks at her, and I just thought that was initially just. Some people just have they don't have a very positive association with artificial intelligence if it's taking their jobs. We learned that the father lost his job in the past, perhaps related to this scenario. But we then later find out that it's because he knows about the mother's idea for Klara to then later be a version of Josie in the future. So he doesn't really like being around her. But as soon as he understands that Klara's got this weird idea about how she might be able to help Josie, he goes out of his way to help her. And so I thought that was really interesting. On the one level, artificial intelligence is being shunned and being feared. And on another level, there are people, very intelligent people like the father, who is an engineer, who, against perhaps his better judgment, is going full in on what Klara might be able to do to help his daughter. Anyway, there we are. I don't know if I've done it fully justice. I just wanted to speak, just ramble today. I hope you didn't mind. I think I spoke okay. I think I may have talked enough about what I wanted to talk about. But anyway, if you've read it and you'd like to comment below on what you think, what you thought, whether you liked it or not, what insights you got from reading the book, please do write down below and let me know. We can have a little chat about it. Otherwise, if you haven't and you're still watching this, I've spoiled it a little bit for you, but it's still very much worth reading. It would make a very good film, I think. But anyway, I'll leave it there. It's gone on way too long. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Cheerio!